I drank dumb juice. In my last video, some of you may remember the Talk at the Cock, the first ever video of that series. I decided I was going to do a list of my favorite albums in the Quebecois black metal scene in 2018, but some interesting things happened. So for that video, there's an interesting kind of behind the scenes thing. And that thing that's behind the scenes is that basically I drank a lot of beer before because I had to get the right shot of pouring the beer into the glass, and I kind of messed it up a few times and had to drink those beers and anyways, long story short, by the time I was actually doing the video, I was like kind of buzzed. And the Talk at the Cock videos are videos that I don't intend to be scripted at all, so I had zero notes. And anyways, it was someone in the comments brought it to my attention that I actually didn't mention Spectral Wound, which was crazy because that is one of my favorite albums from Quebec of that year. I don't know why I forgot it exactly. It probably had something to do with the 3 beers I drank before actually recording that video, but that can't go uncorrected. I am making this video to talk about Spectral Wound and to kind of get a second stab at my QCBM list for 2018 because I can't have that list made without this album on it. It's just too good. So, Spectral Wound, the album's called Infernal, Decadence, and they released a tape on Phil de Mal, which was really cool, but one interesting thing about this band is that there's 2 members of Profane Order. If any of you listen to war metal, you may know Profane Order. They're a really great war metal band, one that Clint's a huge fan of. And then Tagric as well is another band from Montreal, a more, I would say, atmospheric black metal. Admittedly, I don't listen to them too much, but I am like somewhat familiar with them, so if I'm wrong on that genre tag, then correct me. But anyways, so this band, Spectral Wound, is made up of members from those 2 bands, which makes their music really interesting because it's like QCBM with an edge. So it's got those like almost folky, really cold, frozen elements of QCBM that are characteristic of the genre, but at the same time they have this really polished, aggressive edge to it that sounds way, way more unusually developed than you hear in most QCBM bands. And the reason for that is because of the 2 members of Profane Order. You can totally hear the influence that they put into it. Spectral Wound is honestly like if you combined Tagric and Profane Order, you can just so clearly hear the influence from both sides of that. It's like if they both had a baby. There's like guitar solos in this album, which I think is absolutely awesome, because that is totally an underrated thing to do in black metal, I feel. But the cool thing about this album is that the riffs actually they kind of vary slightly from each other. The riffs are the central focus of this album. It's kind of like I'm not sure whether it was done deliberately or not, but every next song on the album is like kind of only a slight variation on the riffs of the previous song. And so it's kind of like going step by step, like building blocks, and the effect that has is kind of like falling down some kind of mysterious frozen rabbit hole, I guess. And I don't know if it was done deliberately, but there is kind of a hint on their Bandcamp page that kind of leads me to think that it is on purpose. It's something they said on there is step by step, one goes into the darkness, the movement is the only truth. So I have a feeling that applies to their songwriting just as much as it applies to maybe the themes and the imagery behind this album, which I think makes for a really, really cool listen and definitely really unique. But despite the fact that the aggression is kind of a shining star on this album, it's great that you don't get tired of it. The aggression is broken up by these slower parts where it just really focuses on these very simple riffs and these very simple occasional melodic ornaments. And it's not anything too complicated. This album is not something that I would describe as minimalistic in any sense of the word. That's just not what Spectral Wound do. But the riffs and melodies are just center stage. It's like they know they have something great, and so they just allow it to unfold quite naturally. It's kind of like Italian food. The key to the whole thing is just having the best ingredients. and I feel like that is a similar approach that Spectral Wound take, especially on this album. Terra Nullius was their first album, the one before this. I think that's their only other release, but that was in 2015, and it's interesting because if you compare the two, they're honestly not that different. Terra Nullius, I would say I prefer Infernal Decadence just a little bit more than Terra Nullius, mostly for production reasons. I appreciate the production on Infernal Decadence quite a bit more than on Terra Nullius, but honestly, there are not that many differences overall in the two albums, which I think is really interesting because to me that says that they know what they want and they've got a clear image that they want to work towards, and it's really cool to see bands do that and not sound too repetitive. One interesting thing about this album is that it does use repetition quite a lot. You're not going to find any like typical atmospheric black metal stuff like repeating the same riff for 12 minutes, cough, wide dude. But you will find that the riffs, there will only be a couple of riffs in every song, and they repeat each other in cycles. It kind of cycles around in this really interesting way. But you won't see the same riff being used for a really long time. It changes itself up frequently, but at the same time it still manages to be quite repetitive. And that's just a really interesting thing that they do that I can appreciate a lot, because it's still hypnotic, but it still is aggressive, and that is a really odd combination. You don't tend to see that. So that is something that stands out on this album for me, one of the reasons why it is one of my favorite from Quebec this year. And so I think I'm going to start wrapping things up because I didn't really intend for this video to be a long one. I guess this is kind of like a brief review of the album. You can take it that way if you want. But anyways, I'm going to kind of redo my list. The list is ultimately going to be number 1, Sorcier de Glace, number 2, Akitsa, number 3, Cantique Lépreux, number 4 is going to be Spectral Wound, and number 5 is Infernal. And I guess I'll just be pushing Sanctuaire and Keys of Orthanc down to an honorable mention. But honestly, this has been a great year for QCBM, and now that I've got this video out of the way, I can kind of move on to the next year, which is awesome. I'm really looking forward to 2019 in metal, specifically because it's kind of off to a really great start because Quercus finally released a new album. I say finally like it's been a long time, but the last one they released was 2016. Anyways, so you guys should hop on that if you haven't already. It is definitely gonna be one of the best in Funeral Doom this year, I already feel. So anyways, that's just a quick recommendation, but thanks for watching.